It was supposed to be a simple stop, a billionaire, whose name was whispered in boardrooms and splashed across magazines, pulled into a dusty old gas station on the edge of town. His car gleamed under the dim lights, a machine worth more than the entire block it was parked on. He didn't even notice the faded sign, or the cracked pavement, or the weary cashier behind the counter. To him, this was just a pit stop, a forgettable pause on his way to yet another meeting, another deal, another stage where people clapped for him just because of the money in his pocket. But that night, life had other plans. When he swiped his sleek black card, the one that never failed, the machine beeped. Declined. He frowned, swiped again. Declined. A third time. Declined. The air grew heavy. A line was forming behind him. The cashier shifted nervously, unsure whether to speak. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt the sting of embarrassment. He muttered something about calling the bank, about systems failing, but inside, panic rattled him. He wasn't used to walls. He was used to doors swinging open, people bending, red carpets rolling at his feet. And that's when he heard it, a small, timid voice. "Sir, we can help." He turned, and there they were, two little black twins, no older than 8, holding out a handful of coins and crumpled bills. Their clothes were worn, shoes scuffed, yet their faces shone with the kind of innocence and courage he hadn't seen in decades. For a moment, the billionaire didn't understand. They were offering to pay for him. He chuckled, a bitter laugh. "Do you know how much this costs? Do you think your little pennies can fill this tank?" But the boy, steady in his gaze, said softly, "Mama says when you see someone in need, you help, even if all you got is little." The billionaire froze. In need. Him? The man who owned skyscrapers, private jets, and islands? But the cashier was still staring. The line was growing, and the weight of humiliation was pressing harder. Against his pride, he nodded. The twins spilled their change on the counter, and the pump was activated. The billionaire stood in silence as the numbers ticked on the gas pump, shame knotting in his throat. He had everything. Yet it was children who had nothing that stepped in for him. And as he drove off into the night, full tank behind him, the billionaire couldn't shake the sound of that boy's voice. "Mama says, when you see someone in need, you help." Those words would haunt him. And soon they would change everything. He drove away that night, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than ever. The billionaire Victor Harrington wasn't a man who liked weakness. His empire was built on winning, on never showing a crack. But as the highway lights blurred past his windshield, he couldn't stop replaying the image of those children offering him coins with dirty little palms, with smiles that carried more dignity than his billion-dollar suits. For the first time in years, he didn't feel rich. He felt small. But back at his glass tower, the story of his life played differently. Employees whispered about his power. Magazines printed his face under words like visionary, tycoon, icon. Yet behind closed doors, there were problems he kept hidden. His investments were crumbling. His board was restless, and tonight's declined card wasn't a mistake. It was the first sign of collapse. Victor had no one to talk to. His phone contacts were filled with people who wanted deals, not friendships. His family, well, he didn't really have one anymore. His ex-wife had left years ago, saying his heart belonged to money, not to love. His daughter, estranged, living far away, barely picked up his calls. So who was he really, when the wealth was stripped away? Just a lonely man with a full tank, bought by children who should have been asleep, not saving strangers. On the other side of town, in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, the twins Caleb and Naomi crept in through a squeaky door. Their mother, worn out from a double shift, stirred awake on the couch. "Where have you two been?" she asked, her voice heavy with fatigue. "We helped a man at the gas station," Naomi said, her eyes shining. "His card didn't work, so we gave him our jar." The mother sat up. "What jar?" "The saving jar," Caleb answered, almost proudly. "The one for our school trip. But it's okay, Mama. He needed help. You always say we should share." Their mother's heart twisted. She wanted to scold them for giving away what little they had, but their innocence, their pure faith in kindness, made her fall silent. She pulled them close, whispering, "God sees what you did tonight, and he won't forget." She didn't know then that the man they helped wasn't just anyone. He was the man whose name lit up city skylines. And he hadn't forgotten either. That night, Victor couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop, typed a note, deleted it, and tried again. But no words felt right. What could a billionaire possibly say to two children who had saved him in a moment of shame? And then a thought hit him like lightning. What if they hadn't been there? What if no one stepped in? He would have been humiliated. Headlines might have leaked. His competitors would have pounced. His empire might have collapsed faster. The twins hadn't just bought him gas. They had bought him time. Victor Harrington, the man who thought he had everything, realized his survival had come from the pockets of children who had nothing. The next morning, Victor Harrington sat in his office, staring at the skyline he practically owned. His desk was cluttered with files of mergers pending, lawsuits threatening stock reports dripping red. Yet none of it held his attention. All he could see in his mind's eye were two small faces lit by the flickering glow of the gas station sign, two hands stretching out coins, two voices whispering, "You can have ours." He couldn't shake it. For a man who had built his fortune by calculating everything, every risk, every number, every human move, this unplanned encounter gnawed at him. It was as if the universe had scripted it just to remind him he wasn't invincible. But billionaires weren't supposed to feel humbled, and yet here he was humbled. So he made a decision, one he never made before. He told his assistant, "Cancel my morning meetings. I need to take care of something personal." The assistant froze. In 5 years, she had never heard those words. Victor got into his car and drove back to that lonely gas station. The clerk looked up nervously when the billionaire entered. "Last night," Victor said, his voice firm but gentle, "2 children were here, twins, a boy and a girl. They helped me when my card declined. Do you know them?" The clerk scratched his head. "Yeah, Caleb and Naomi. Sweet kids, they live with their mama a few blocks from here. Not much money, but good hearts, real good hearts." Victor felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, gratitude, and a strange kind of urgency. "Tell me where." It didn't take long before Victor found himself parked in front of a rundown apartment building, its paint peeling, its windows cracked. The billionaire who lived in glass towers now stood before crumbling bricks. He hesitated at the door. What was he even going to say? "Hello, I'm the man whose pride you rescued at a gas station?" Before he could knock, the door creaked open. Caleb stood there holding a half-broken toy truck. His eyes widened. "You!" the boy gasped. "You're the man from last night?" Naomi appeared behind him, clutching a threadbare doll. She whispered, "Mama, it's him!" Their mother came forward, confused and wary. She recognized the stranger instantly, and his face had been on billboards, magazines, even TV. But what was he doing at their doorstep? Victor cleared his throat. "I came to say thank you." His voice wavered, and it surprised him. "You helped me when no one else would, and I can't forget that." The mother folded her arms. "They're children. They didn't know you didn't need it." Victor shook his head slowly. "But I did need it. More than you realize." And that was the moment on that tiny threshold where two worlds collided. The billionaire with everything to lose, and a family with nothing to spare. What Victor didn't know was that this meeting wasn't just repayment for a debt. It was the beginning of his redemption, and theirs too. Victor Harrington had sat in countless boardrooms with the world's sharpest minds. He had stared down competitors, crushed rivals, and outmaneuvered billion-dollar corporations. Yet here, inside this cramped little apartment, he felt more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. Their mother's name was Angela, and she offered him a chair that creaked when he sat. The twins perched on either side of her, their curious eyes fixed on the billionaire as if he were a character who had stepped out of a fairy tale. Victor cleared his throat. "Last night at the gas station, I want you to know something. I'm not a man who forgets. What your children did, it wasn't small. It wasn't just coins. It was dignity. Something I thought I lost a long time ago." Angela tilted her head, skeptical. "You're Harrington, aren't you? The man who owns half this city?" Victor gave a small, tired smile. "On paper, maybe. But last night, none of that mattered. My card failed. My pride failed. And it was your children who reminded me what matters most." Angela didn't reply immediately. Years of scraping by, of watching wealthy men step over people like her, had made her cautious. But Caleb suddenly blurted out, "Do you have cars? Big ones?" Victor chuckled. "Too many." Naomi leaned forward, clutching her doll. "Do you have dolls too? For girls?" For the first time in years, Victor laughed, a genuine, full laugh. I think I can find one. That night was only the beginning. Victor began visiting. At first it was awkward to him in his tailored suits, then in their hand-me-down clothes, but something invisible kept pulling him back. He discovered that Angela worked 2 jobs, barely enough to cover rent, that the twins often shared one meal between them when money ran out. Caleb's dream was to be an engineer, though he played with broken toys. Naomi wanted to be a doctor, though her notebooks were filled with second-hand scribbles. And slowly, something inside Victor began to shift. The billionaire who once believed numbers ruled the world was learning that hearts ruled it far more. One evening, as Victor walked them back from the corner store, Caleb asked innocently, "Mister, why were you at the gas station all alone? Don't billionaires have people who buy things for them?" Victor paused. The truth was heavier than he liked to admit. Sometimes, having everything means you end up with no one. Last night, I think, I was more alone than I realized. Naomi slipped her small hand into his, her voice soft but sure. "You're not alone anymore." Victor's chest tightened. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear those words until now. But soon word began to spread. A billionaire seen walking into a crumbling apartment building. A man with shareholders and rivals spending hours in a neighborhood others called the Forgotten Zone. People began asking questions. The media sniffed a story. The board of his company demanded answers. And that's when Victor realized helping these children wasn't just kindness. It was a choice that could cost him everything. It started with a photo. Someone had snapped Victor Harrington, the billionaire no one ever saw outside boardrooms or black-tie galas, walking out of Angela's apartment building with 2 little kids holding his hands. By morning, it was plastered across headlines, "Billionaire Harrington in the slums' secret family." From Fortune 500 to food stamps, Harrington's strange double life. The news spread like wildfire. Board members called emergency meetings. Stockholders panicked. Reporters camped outside his mansion, demanding explanations. His assistant warned him that this was reputation suicide. But Victor didn't care about cameras or gossip. What worried him was the look on Angela's face when she opened the paper and saw the photo. "You shouldn't be here anymore," she whispered that evening, fear laced in her voice. "These people, your world isn't kind to ours. They'll twist this." Victor shook his head. "I don't care about them." Angela's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "But I do. My children don't deserve to be dragged into some scandal. They're just kids, Mr. Harrington." For the first time, she called him by his last name again, as if putting back the wall she had let fall. Caleb and Naomi, confused, held onto his coat, not understanding why their new friend suddenly looked so pained. The board didn't wait. In a glass tower high above the city, 10 men and women stared down at Victor like wolves ready to tear him apart. "Your antics are tanking our reputation," one spat. "You're mingling with people who will ruin this company," another sneered. "You need to cut ties immediately. No more visits, no more charity. Walk away or step down." Victor sat in silence, their words hammering into him. The empire he built, the legacy his father demanded, was slipping from his grip. But then he remembered the twins, small hands holding him. Naomi's whisper, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in decades, Victor Harrington looked his board in the eye and said the unthinkable. "If walking away from them is what it takes to keep this company, then you can have it. I won't abandon them." Gasps echoed around the table. The wolves had never seen the lion bare his heart. That night, Victor drove straight to Angela's apartment. She opened the door, ready to tell him to leave again until she saw his eyes. "I chose," he said simply, "and I didn't choose the board. I chose you. I chose them." Angela covered her mouth with trembling hands. The twins wrapped themselves around his legs. In that tiny apartment, something powerful was forged by a family. Yet the storm outside was only beginning. For if Victor Harrington thought the world would let him walk away clean, he was about to learn that the cost of kindness was far greater than he ever imagined. The fallout came faster than Victor ever imagined. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists dug into every corner of his life. Tabloids called Angela a gold digger. Ugly headlines twisted Caleb and Naomi into props for pity. The cruelty was relentless. Victor's mansion, once a fortress of privacy, was now a cage surrounded by flashing cameras and angry voices. Protesters gathered outside his company headquarters, demanding his resignation. Business partners withdrew deals. Stocks plummeted. But what hurt him most was knowing Angela had to endure the same storm. One evening, he arrived at her apartment to find her sitting in the dark. The twins were asleep on the couch, clutching their little school bags like shields. "I can't do this to them," Angela whispered, her voice broken. "They deserve a childhood, not flashing cameras in their faces. You should go back to your world, Victor. Let us disappear." Victor knelt before her. "Angela, if I walk away now, I will become the man I used to be. A cold, empty man. What your children gave me, there's no empire in the world that can match that." Angela's tears fell, but she didn't argue. Deep down, she knew his words were true. The next day, something unexpected happened. Caleb and Naomi, just 9 years old, showed up outside Victor's skyscraper. In front of dozens of cameras and angry reporters, the little twins walked hand in hand through the crowd. Naomi stepped forward, her voice small but steady. "Mr. Harrington is our friend. He's not bad. He helped us when no one else would." Caleb, braver than his years, added, "And we don't care if he's rich or poor. He's family now." The crowd went silent. These weren't rehearsed statements. They weren't PR spin. They were children, pure and unfiltered, speaking truth. And in that silence, hearts shifted. A few people lowered their cameras. A few softened their harsh stares. The story of a cold billionaire was unraveling, replaced by the story of a man who had found humanity in 2 children, who gave when he had nothing. But not everyone was moved. In the shadows, Victor's biggest rival, a fellow billionaire who had long envied his empire, saw an opportunity. "If Harrington wants to play house with street kids," he sneered at his associates, "then let's make sure he loses everything." What came next would test not only Victor but the twins, in a way no one could have imagined. Victor's rival struck fast. One morning, Victor woke up to a world turned upside down. His accounts were frozen. His board voted to push him out. Reporters swarmed with headlines screaming, "Billionaire Harrington bankrupt, children involved in scandal." He had nothing left but a bruised reputation and the trust of Angela and her twins. For the first time since his empire was built, Victor Harrington had lost control. At Angela's small apartment, the billionaire sat at a wooden kitchen table, his head in his hands. Caleb and Naomi sat across from him, watching in silence. Finally, Caleb asked softly, "Mr. Victor, why do you look like us now?" Victor blinked. "Like you," Naomi explained, her childlike innocence piercing him deeper than any headline. "Because we don't have money either. But Mama says money doesn't mean you're rich. Love does." Victor's chest tightened. These children who had nothing were handing him the greatest truth he had never seen. The very next day, something unimaginable happened. The twins showed up again at Victor's corporate tower, only this time, not to defend him with words, but with action. In front of reporters, board members, and even Victor's sneering rival, Caleb climbed onto a chair and pulled out a crumpled piggy bank. "This is all we got," he said, "but if it helps Mr. Victor, we'll give it." Naomi added, placing a tiny braided wig she had made for her dolls into Victor's trembling hands. "So you remember, even when people take away your crown, you still have family." The room went silent. These children had just given away everything they owned. And in that silence, the rival billionaire's mockery fell flat. Reporters lowered their cameras, many wiping tears. Even hardened board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The untouchable billionaire had just been redeemed by the smallest, purest hands in the room. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary happened. Public opinion flipped. People who once mocked Victor now admired him not for his wealth, but for his humility and his unlikely new family. Business deals slowly returned, not because of money, but because clients believed in his humanity. Angela found steady work. The twins went back to school, prouder than ever. And Victor? He spent less time in boardrooms and more time at kitchen tables, learning to laugh and to live again. 1 year later, at a company charity gala, Victor stood on stage, not to boast of profits, but to introduce 2 little heroes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice breaking, "meet Caleb and Naomi, the children who taught me that the richest man is not the one with the fullest bank account, but the one with the fullest heart." The crowd rose in thunderous applause. Cameras flashed, Angela smiled through tears, and in that moment, the billionaire who once had everything but nothing finally had what mattered most. If this story touched your heart, remember sometimes the smallest hands make the biggest difference, and true wealth is love. If you believe in stories of hope, redemption, and humanity, make sure to subscribe to Colorless Voices, where every story reminds us that dignity is priceless.